Hi, this is David Miles Huber and Emiliano Caballero with Modern Recording Techniques. And today we'd like to talk to you about continuing the story of using distance as a tool for microphone recording. And we talked the last time we talked basically about close miking and how it's the most common style of recording, basically keeping it really close and eliminating the acoustics. Today we would like to talk about semi-distant miking techniques, and under that it's interesting with the idea of so what do I mean by semi-distant? And this is an interesting style that is used by basically more, I'm going to say it, by more advanced recording engineers and producers. And usually these are the tools that are used in better sounding rooms, such as Capitol Records, Abbey Road, all of this stuff, but it is not limited to those kind of rooms by any stretch. So semi-distant can mean two things. One is accent miking. That is, and I'm going to use this in a classical sense. That is, you have a full orchestra, and all of a sudden there's a flute solo that happens. And that flute is too far in the background. If you have a single stereo pair, or if you're recording the entire orchestra, and that flute is too far in the background, and you want to bring it out a little bit. You want to have an accent for it to basically make it stand out a little bit. And that would be, like I said, an accent microphone. And that could be anywhere from 6 feet to 12 feet, from 2 meters to 3 meters, even 4 meters in distance. And what it will do is it'll just add a little bit of forwardness, a little bit of shimmer to that instrument. Now, this style is also quite used often in film. Actually, it's used quite a lot in film recording. That is, today you'll see like pictures of Abbey Road. You'll see pictures of in larger studios where like you get 4 violins, for example, and those 4 violins would be picked up by 2 mics at a distance of 6 feet, 2 meters, for example, placed between the instruments. So in a film recording classical style, you would not have the instruments like 3 inches from the strings. It would be 3 feet, 6 feet, more commonly, 3 to 6 feet, quite commonly, up to 2 meters. And that just adds the warmth of the room. It allows for the instrument to breathe. And as we talked about in close miking, where you're so close that you are zoomed in and you're doing a microscopic, you're pulling back from that and picking up the entire instrument and the acoustics, and actually using leakage as your friend for the other instruments. Leakage is not always a bad thing. That idea of semi-distant is quite often used in jazz recording, where you also pull off in the same way. With a saxophone, it might be it could be from 1 meter to 2 meters, 3 feet to 6 feet. You double up instruments. All of this. If you're short on microphones and you have a really good room, you can double up on instruments and use the room to your effect. These are some things just to really think about, that not just close, but to pull back. And it's a tool that I believe in very, very strongly. Also, if you're doing reamping, to be able to pull back, semi-distant is a really good one for reamping, to give you a choice of close and distant. E, do you have thoughts about that?
Yes, I want to introduce, for those who are more advanced in recording, if you don't know what polar patterns for microphones are, I recommend you to go and read in the book about polar patterns for different microphones. One of the reasons, besides acoustics, that people tend to stay away from leakage, it's because certain polar patterns respond differently to leakage. What I'm saying is, if you have an omnidirectional Neumann mic M49, so for example, and you put it in front of a double bass, in front of a Spanish guitar, the off-axis response of that microphone, so whatever is basically behind the microphone, is going to be captured in the same way, the same tonal characteristics and directional characteristics as whatever is in front of the microphone, because it's omnidirectional characteristics, so it's pretty much even across all the angles, That gives a more natural sound to a recording than if you just put everything with cardioid mics. That is one way to have more natural sounding recordings when recording ensembles and when recording with different microphones. To continue what Dave says, Latin music, for example, it's combined different, let's say, sections: brass, strings, percussions. Percussions are big in Latin music, and certain styles of Latin music like salsa, son cubano, vallenato, that's from Colombia, tango, are in sections of instruments. So tends to happen that the sound of those recordings are more ambience than pop recordings. So you hear more of a room vibe. Even the vocals are very roomy. Again, that's a style choice and era choice. Like salsa from the 60s sounds different from salsa now, but salsa right now tends to start leaning towards sounds of the 60s, like, what American music does with Motown now, that, like crunchy drums and stuff like that. In the Latin music era, it's like rooms and a lot of, let's say, bleed in between instruments. The other ensemble of instruments that I find particularly interesting to record are drums. I like to think as drums as a one instrument, so I start the drum sound when I record with the overheads and then build from there. Meaning I open the overheads left, right, make sure the kick and snare are in the phantom center. That's essential. Please pay attention, because sometimes when the overheads are in basically left, right pan, the kick is in the left and the snare is in the right, and that's a mess. I find that so many times. So I encourage you to really pay close attention. One way to do it is to imagine like you have the microphones like this. If you divide a line in between the two microphones capsules, that line should coincide with drums, with the kick drum and the snare drum. Meaning if the kick drum and the snare drum has a line like this, the perpendicular line should be the microphones, and that will give you a center image of kick and snare, only the overheads. And then you add the close mics, and always check polarity with the, let's say, close miking techniques, kick and snare and so on. But you should be 80% there with your overhead drum sound.
That was really, really awesome. And it's I completely agree about the recording of drums. You do close miking techniques on drums almost for sure. But then that idea of pulling back and using some semi-distant techniques, the overheads being semi-distant. In addition to that, I will actually add room sounds, distant miking, pulling it back. And so just to pay attention to the overall instrument. Here I'm in Seattle right now, and here we have the London Bridge Studios, which is famous for having big drum sounds. You just get all these studios where you can take the drums and you basically can have a lot of fun with it. So in this, we were talking about the idea of semi-distant miking techniques. And now, when you need to record a mariachi band, you know how to do it. So, so there you
I
go.
love it.
So thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe as we're growing the channel. And we look forward to seeing you the next time when we talk about distant miking techniques, which is really important to know. All the best. We'll see you then.